Perfect. Okay, I want to welcome everybody to our third webinar for the San Clemente Downtown Business Association. Our topic today is property management in the time of COVID-19. My name is Chris Aiken. I am the chair of the San Clemente Downtown Business Association. I'm a principal of the law firm Aiken & Cohn. I'm very, very pleased to welcome Jim Wynne and Cindy Santos from Kidder Mathews. Kidder Mathews is the largest independent commercial real estate firm on the West Coast, with more than 800 real estate professionals and staff in 22 offices in Washington, Oregon, California, Nevada, and Arizona. Jim is the senior vice president here with Kidder Mathews. He has nearly 3 decades of diversified commercial real estate experience, spanning construction management to commercial brokerage. He has recently received the award for Volunteer of the Year from our own San Clemente Chamber of Commerce. Cindy Santos is the property management for a little over 5 years, started in residential and been commercial for the last 3 years. She oversees over 275,000 square feet of industrial, office, medical, and retail all throughout Orange and LA County. They are here to discuss the rules and regulations to protect against evictions, both commercial and residential. Before I introduce them, if you have questions, they are open for questions. So if you have questions, feel free to use it. Attendees through the chat box or question and answer box, they welcome your questions. So without further ado, I want to give very pleased to welcome Jim and Cindy to our webinar. Thank you very much for being here.
My pleasure.
Thanks.
So I would like to start with talking about how businesses can negotiate with their landlords and how they should be communicating with their landlords, especially I'm sure many of the attendees have had their business revenue affected, or perhaps even the ability to even open up their doors at all. So my first suggestion would be to get your lease out and read your lease very thoroughly. I would read over it a couple of times and make sure you really understand what is in there. A couple things specifically is you would want to look and see if you have a personal guarantee. Many leases do have a personal guarantee. And so if your personal financial assets are on the line, the last thing you're going to want to do is just walk away from the lease. Or you want to negotiate with your landlord and try to come to some kind of resolution. The next specific thing that I would recommend that you do is contact your insurance company. And I did another webinar on this before, and the advice was to contact your insurance company to determine if your business interruption insurance covers this event. You need to get, what's changed then is to get the copy of the policy, and you need to read that policy, because when we had the SARS event 20 years ago, many of the insurance companies inserted exclusions prohibiting claims for disruptions caused by viruses, but not all of them did. And I was just reading an article this morning, and some businesses have already filed a claim that did not have a specific exclusion prohibiting claims, and they were still denied their policy. And the American Property Casualty Insurance Association came out and said that disruption policy was never intended for a major event like this. It was more in the event of a localized, like a fire or a hurricane. And they state that if only small businesses that have been affected by this, if they were to pay out all those claims, it would be $430 billion per month for this event, and they would be rendered insolvent quickly. And so Wolfgang Puck, who's a famous restaurateur and evidently has personal connection with the president, has started a group called the Business Interruption Group, and that's a coalition that's led by Wolfgang Puck in association with a well-known attorney. I can't think of his name right now, but they have established a website, and that's wearebig.org. So we, the letter R, BIG.org, and they have a Get Involved tab where they ask for your name, your email, your company name, the state, and your business type. So I would suggest, even if you do have an exclusion in your policy, I would still sign up for that, because I think there's going to be some changes, or maybe even other relief through the government to the insurance companies where they can pay out on these policies. So I would keep a really close tab on that. And especially, evidently, the president said at the last White House briefing that he thought that insurers should pay the claims if the policies did not include a pandemic exclusion. So this is something that's at the forefront right now, and could really affect your ability to get funds to keep your business going or to reimburse for your losses. So I'd really keep a close eye on this business interruption group. So my next bit of advice is, if you are going to be asking for rent relief, I would put together your financials right now, your 2 years tax returns, balance sheet, profit and loss, and year to date. And I would document what your sales were prior to the crisis and today, so that when you're talking to the landlord, a lot of the landlords are getting bombarded, hey, I want rent relief. Well, they would like to know why. And if you're one of the businesses, I mean, Lowe's is open and doing business, so why should they get rent relief? So I think you need to make your case for why. The other thing would be that you would want to document and be able to show your landlord that you have applied for government help through payroll protection plan, emergency loans, and other avenues that are out there. And then once you do contact your landlord, especially if you're going to be corresponding and writing in the event that you do get to court, realize that someone will be reading your correspondence. So write accordingly, be nice and professional, knowing that someone that could be judging your fate might be judging you by what they know of you through your correspondence. So just be very mindful of that could all become part of a future court case if it gets to that. Most importantly, I would try and listen to your landlord and understand where they're coming from, and see how you can come together and negotiate a deal that works the best for both of you. I'm in a couple of transactions right now where we're extending escrows on properties that we have for sale, and the sellers who are really understand what's going on with this crisis and are being reasonable, I think will benefit. At the end of the day, I think we'll be able to get a deal done. Where the ones that are digging in their heels, I think you're going to end up in either a court case, or you're not going to have a transaction, and perhaps the property sale to the landlord, sale or lease, will be less favorable later. So I think it's smarter to try and figure out a way to work things out now. And then whatever you do agree to with the landlord, you want to have that in writing. And even better, if you could have that reviewed by an attorney or prepared by an attorney to make sure what you agreed upon is legal and binding, then that would be my advice. And then just my last thought on this, it's kind of hard for me to talk about this kind of as a way of failure, and how to negotiate with your landlord, and how to talk to your business interruption insurance in the event you go out of business. So I don't know, we're Americans, so you have to get out there and fight and be creative and innovative and work to keep your business open. People have poured their lives and blood and sweat and tears and family and risk and money. So don't give up. Go out there and fight and try and make this all happen. So that's what I have to say for this segment.
Jim, you mentioned a question, get the lease, I guess, and any reviewed by an attorney. Are you talking, are you envisioning like an amendment to the lease? Are you talking
An
about
amendment, exactly. So if you agree, for instance, Irvine Company did a blanket offer to their retail tenants where they do not have to pay rent for the next 3 months, but then they're tacking on 3 months at the end of the term. So something like that, you would want to get in writing and have an amendment to the lease. Others are negotiating partial rent reduction. So I think it's just a really case-by-case basis, especially depending on your business, whether your doors are open at all or not. I think is a big part of that negotiation too. Like for instance, I mean, if you're a barber shop and you can't open your doors, I don't think that you can say no rent in 3 months and then I'll pay you rent, because at this point you just don't know when you'll be able to open your doors again. So it might have to be something that's tied to a lift in the stay-at-home order, or even the lift at stay-at-home order, there's going to be some restrictions on that. So it might be, there might be a specific opening of your business type restaurant, barbershop, for example. So maybe it's tied into an official opening of your business segment. And then it's not like you can just start paying rent the day you open. You have to generate some revenue. So perhaps it's 30 or 60 days or 90 days after your business opens and you start paying a reduced rent. Or, I mean, if your business really takes off, maybe you're able to pay 150% of what you were paying so that you can start paying back essentially what was a loan that was given to you by your landlord. So everyone's cases are so unique, and landlords are unique, and their situations are unique as well. Do they have a loan on the property? What's their loan relative to the amount of rent that you owe? Do they own it free and clear? Are they living? Is this their sole source of income? Is the rent that you're paying them to occupy their property? So that's why I say to kind of listen to your landlord's concerns and what they're dealing with, because I think that will help you negotiate something that works out where you can continue to get to the next step, rather than just saying, well, fine, I'll see you in court. And Chris knows it's open, I think, until June 1st at this point. So it's, the courts and attorneys are going to be busy for a long time. So it's going to be a slog. So trying to avoid litigation, I think, is your best bet.
Absolutely. I think what you mentioned, Jim, is that, you know, be mindful that anything you put in writing your communications, that, you know, that certainly you're not, litigation is the last course result, but understand that you put in writing, you want to be properly professional. You don't want to put anything in writing that later on can be used against you. Is that a fair characterization? Yeah,
that's exactly right. I mean, the person that could be deciding your fate is going to be reading this correspondence. So they're like, oh man, this guy's a jerk. He doesn't deserve any. You don't want to create any animosity on someone that doesn't know you. And that we're all under an extreme level of stress right now. So it would be pretty easy, I think, to get snippy in those emails. So taking a deep breath and reading your email before you send it, or having somebody read it, and you don't want to have any animosity, or just remember someone's going to be reading that email. So keep that in mind. And talking on the phone, I think, is always a really good way to go too, because emails can be really impersonal and misunderstood because there's no voice inflection in something in writing. So, you know, initially, if you can speak with your landlord or your property manager, I think you'll have a higher level of success rather than just putting something in writing to start off the negotiation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Hey, Cindy, if you could turn to you, if that's okay. We've got a lot of different questions on the property management side that if you could that I think the businesses are interested in hearing. So on a property management side, if you are a tenant that does not have the funds for your monthly rent payment, do you have any advice for them?
Yeah. So I think the most important thing is to stay up to date on all the news that's coming out right now, especially as it pertains to small businesses and tenants in the state, because there's a lot of stuff that's changing and coming out every day, it seems like. So just to kind of summarize how that relates to rent relief, on March 16th, Governor Newsom signed an executive order which basically stated that local jurisdictions have the ability to impose stipulations on evictions. And he did that so that the local cities, states, and counties can help their economies and hopefully get in front of how this will financially impact all the cities and states and everything like that. So, and then furthermore, on March 27th, I believe, Governor Newsom signed an executive order which changed the eviction process entirely. So normally what you would have when you're not able to pay rent, you would be served with like a 3 to 5 day notice to pay or quit. And so that executive order basically extended that 3 to 5 day period to 60 days. So you would have a 60-day period of time where you are not legally required to pay rent in a sense. And there's obviously a lot of restrictions and there's a lot of things that go into that, but that would be your main thing that you're focusing on is like, okay, I have this period of time where I can kind of get things in order before I know my landlord's going to come after me. But there's a lot of steps that you have to take to make sure that you're eligible for those benefits. So yeah, if you don't have the funds to pay your rent, I would say your first step is like what Jim said, make sure that you're aware of what the terms in your lease agreement says, make sure that you're, you know who your lease guarantors are, and get your financials together, because I can guarantee you that's the first question that your landlord's going to ask is, can you show me where you've been financially impacted and why you can't pay rent? Because most landlords aren't going to just take your word for it. Sorry about that, my cat. But yeah, so that would be your first step, is making sure that you have all your stuff in order so that when you get it to your landlord, it's a speedy and easy process. It's not something that's being dragged on for months and months before you guys can come to an agreement.
The question I'm getting here is who is eligible for rent relief? How do we understand that better?
So there's a few things that make you eligible. So the first and most important thing I would say is that before this happened and before, I guess, the executive order from March 27th was signed, you would have had to have been in good financial standing, meaning that you had paid your rent in full up until that date. And you're not in any way delinquent before that time. And then because that's going to show that you're a good paying tenant and that you're not directly, that your inability to pay rent is directly related to the COVID-19 virus. And then the second thing would be that you're notifying your landlord within the appropriate time frame. So you want to notify your landlord before your rent comes due, and then that period is not to exceed 7 days after your rent is delinquent. So, and that verbiage is kind of subjective. So the way that I interpret it is like, if you have a 5-day grace period, meaning your rent is due on May 1st, and then you have 5 days before your rent is late, it would be 7 days after that, after May 5th, that you have to notify your landlord. So then after that period of time, you're kind of outside of that, and it would obviously be up to your landlord whether or not they're going to accept that notification, or they're going to tell you, you should have told me sooner, and you're going to have to pay your rent. But I'm not seeing that a whole lot. A lot of landlords have been really lenient in understanding, which is really nice right now when there's a lot of confusion going on. And then, so the third thing is that you're obviously going to have to be impacted by the virus in one way or another. There's a few examples that were inside of the executive order. So some of them are, that you have a confirmed case of the COVID-19 virus. You can show that your hours have been affected, meaning like the shelter in place order has caused your business to close. You were caring for somebody who had the COVID-19 virus, or obviously you're at home because your kids' school is closed and you have to take care of your kids, so you can't be working. So those are just a few examples that would be able to represent that you've been impacted. And then you would have to also have accompanying documentation along with that. So showing the written notice of, yes, my kid's school is closed, or here's my pay stub showing that my hours have gone down, or, this, that, or the other. So those would be the eligible requirements.
There is a question on that from one of our attendees, and let me. It says, is there any danger in accepting partial payments, and would that extend the 60-day stay of eviction timeline? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't think there's any danger in it. I would say for sure, obviously with this eviction moratorium, it's allowing tenants to not pay rent at all. But I think it's been encouraged by the president and also the governor to pay what you can. And I would say I would strongly recommend that as well, in the sense that, even if you can only pay, say your rent is normally like $600 and you can only pay half of that, I would say make that payment. That's super important to your landlord. It's super important. It goes a long way. And I don't think there's any danger to the landlord in accepting it. My only suggestion would be that if you're accepting it and you're going to be accepting it until the end of whatever this ends, you want to get that documented in an amendment for sure. And you want to have those terms and conditions clearly laid out in a document that you can later reference, and it's spelled out.
So you talked about, and I've heard from you and Jim about kind of getting your, about providing some proof for financial hardship. What is some acceptable forms of proof, and what advice do you have there?
So some acceptable signs of proof would definitely, it's kind of surprising. There's a lot of small businesses that don't have a lot of documentation when it comes to their financials. And so that would be something that you would really want to make sure that you're showing accurate numbers. I've gotten some financials for my tenants that are not showing really even what I've asked for. So it can be kind of confusing, but a P&L statement, a profit and loss statement would be really helpful, and especially something that shows to date, like just to today, because if you're a retail business that's been affected by that profit and loss statement is going to show that that your profits have gone down. And that's what the landlords are wanting to see. They're not just wanting to see like, oh, at one point I made money, or, here's my bank statement from January. That's not really going to show that you've been financially impacted. So you want to make sure whatever you're providing is something that is showing that decline in profit.
Here's an interesting question. Is my landlord legally required to grant me free rent because of this pandemic?
So the thing that's confusing about this eviction moratorium is that landlords are saying, how can I make my tenant pay rent right now? And there's not a lot of ways that you can do that, obviously, where the tenants are very much protected right now. But it is saying that after this period, it states inside of the eviction moratorium, and that we're not, this in no way is waiving rent for tenants. It's no way waiving that liability of rent that is due during this time frame. It's just delaying the time that landlords have to collect those funds. So no, it's not free rent, it's abated rent. Deferred rent for the time period. You are going to have to pay that back, and you can be sure that when this is over, your landlords are going to try to collect, unless you come to some sort of agreement in the meantime.
The question is, there's been some discussion, I guess what they call triple net charges, or CAM, and the requirement to pay them. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, so typically, I would say like in retail or, modified gross leases, you're going to pay CAM charges. Those are operating expense charges that go along with your rent, and they're usually billed separately. So with that, there's a lot of back and forth. I have some retail owners that are saying, I'll waive the rent during this pandemic, but I'm still going to make them pay these CAM charges because, they're operating expenses, and, we have to cover our expenses somehow. However, and obviously the executive order doesn't specify whether we are to apply this to rent or CAM charges. But a lot of leases, if you read your lease, a lot of leases say rent is all monetary obligations that are due under this lease agreement. So that would encompass everything. So that means that if you're telling your landlord that I'm unable to pay rent and they're saying, okay, but you still have to pay your CAM charges, you can kind of show them like, well, actually, you know, in my lease, it says the obligations encompass everything that's due. And if I can't pay it, I can't pay it. And you can't, can't require me to pay it. So you've got to really be clear on what your lease is stating and all of these different documentations, so that you can be your own advocate, because there's a lot of unknowns out there. So if you are, you know, confident in what your lease agreement says and what relief is out there for you, then you're going to be able to, you know, be your best advocate.
And if I could just chime in on, this is where the listening to your landlord and understanding their concerns part and negotiation comes in. The net charges are, that's your property taxes. If you're not paying your utilities directly, utilities could be things like trash and landscaping. So especially if your doors are open and you're trying to conduct business and the landlord isn't receiving any rental income or anything to help cover his property taxes and building insurance, landscaping, trash, and you're trying to operate your business, now all of a sudden the trash man isn't coming to pick up your trash. So that's what those net charges or CAM charges are going to cover, those kinds of expenses that the landlord has. Association fees is another one as well. So just be aware of, that's what those charges entail, or those items.
So then the question comes, when would you have to pay it back, and how long do you have to pay these things back? What advice would you have on that subject?
Well, obviously, with your landlord and you negotiating, anything that you guys can come to an agreement upon and is stated in that whatever amendment you guys can agree upon is it should stay in there what your payback period is, and then, but as far as like a relief period, it's 60 days, and that's the 60 days that's given from the governor. So that's something that you have as being in the state of California. So it's 60 days.
So in this payback period, how do penalties work? How would you address that?
Well, we're not allowed to charge late fees right now. So that's a whole nother thing that comes along with this eviction moratorium. But really, it's really a wait and see kind of thing right now. There's a lot of different moratoriums that are out there because of the local, you know, the local stipulations being available. So you're going to have your state moratoriums, you're going to have your county moratoriums. Just for example, in LA, we had the city and LA County and the state of California moratoriums, and they were all saying different things at one point. And they've now since all accepted the same terms, but in that interim of the time, it's like, okay, well, this one says I can charge late fees, this one says I can't, you know, so there's different stuff, and you really just got to be current on all of the news and how it relates to tenants and small businesses, and making sure that your landlords are giving you at least the minimum of what is available to you and what you know can ask for, because there's a lot of landlords that are not wanting their tenants to know that these sort of reliefs are out there for them and available to use. So that's something that you have to, again, be your own advocate.
And how long do I have to submit my notification to my landlord?
So yeah, so it's the 7 days. So you want to let them know either, like way ahead of time, you want to be looking ahead at your financials and being like, okay, well, I can pay May, but you know, June's going to be really hard based off of these projections here. So you want to know, okay, letting your landlord know today, I don't think I'm going to be able to pay June. Stuff like that, where the sooner you can let your landlord know, the better. But then after your rent is due, you have 7 days to let them know. And then after that 7-day period, your landlord can say, well, you didn't tell me in time, so you know you're going to have to pay rent when it's due.
I know these days it's, I mean, as far as rent relief and these subjects, it's a really moving target.
Yeah.
How do I keep myself updated? What are some of the resources that we could use to keep the latest updates of how to act during this time?
I would say ask your property manager for sure. And then also, you know, being on the state websites and your county websites, stuff like that, that it's kind of hard to find. And I've become quite the investigator trying to dig through these state websites and county websites. But I would just say to just stay up to date on those websites, because they're going to show you what stuff is available and what new executive orders the governor signed and stuff like that, or what's being voted on at city council, all that good stuff.
Well, I appreciate that. Well, guys, I really appreciate it. You guys, any final comments, anything else you guys would like to communicate before we close the meeting? I mean, it's been fantastic stuff. We really appreciate it. Jim or Cindy?
Good luck.
Yeah.
Keep your head up.
Yeah.
This will pass. We'll have brighter times on our horizons.
Yeah, be patient and be kind to your landlord. Be kind to your property manager. We're all just people, and we're all figuring this out as we go as well. So, yeah.
Well, on behalf of the Downtown Business Association, Jim, Cindy, thank you very, very much for providing this information for our businesses. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.